Hey everyone, welcome to the webinar today. We're just waiting on a few more attendees to join us, but while we do, we just want to make sure the chat section is working. If you are able to just let us know where you're dialing in from today. Myself, I'm dialing in today from Sydney. We've our speaker here, George, is dialing in from Toronto. It's about 10 p.m. for him there Wednesday night, so we have someone here dialing in from Perth, George. Laura. Thanks, Laura.
Thanks, Laura.
Just a few more people there now joining us. So I know this is definitely going to be a good session today, chatting about ESG, and very relevant to the current situations around the globe and obviously nationally. To start off, my name's Dean Devereux. I'm a training consultant here with Informa Connect Academy, consult on energy and rail training. We have George Pinedo here. He's going to be chatting with us today about unlocking economic value through ESG in energy. To let you know, this webinar will be going on for about probably 40 minutes. We are recording it. George will be sharing some beneficial information regarding ESG. After that, both myself and George will take some questions and just regarding your specific challenges within your industry. As we go through the slides though, you can put in your questions there in the chat if it's working for you. So George, I'll hand over to yourself. Would you start obviously just by giving us some information about you and I suppose what brought you to the subject, you know, what interests you about it?
Cool. Thank you. So hello everyone. I'll introduce myself, George Pinedo, or Jorge Pinedo for the ones that can speak Spanish or can pronounce the J. I'm a 30+ year energy professional. I've had the fortune to have worked in 15 different countries all around the world. I started as a wireline engineer working in Kuwait, and I've progressed in the oil industry as many positions, ending up being manager, general manager, operations manager in type roles. Before recently, I moved more into the consulting side. So as background at the moment, I'm looking after some projects in Australia, as well as Iraq, and also doing some interesting projects in Peru, where I was born. I'm talking to you from Toronto, where my family lives. They need a base. They need stability. I'll do the traveling around. What motivated me to get into ESG was really as recent as 2021 or so, after 4 years working and being stuck in Oman on an offshore project. And since then, the ESG or environmental and social and governance issues were kind of like in the conversation of everyone. And what really been new to the concept or the framework, all I could hear was negative comments from the people around me, my superiors, my peers, and the comments every time we heard or they heard ESG was, oh, it's about emissions. It's a tool for the Greens to attack fossil fuels. And that sort of prompted me my natural curiosity to look into that more. And I discovered very quickly that in the energy industry, we are doing already ESG, as we'll have a slide about it. and actually we are missing the boat by trying to fight it rather than, what's the word, embrace the concept of ESG, you know. And so I've transitioned from ignorance to understanding and learning, discovering, from embracing, and I didn't realize I was embracing it, you know, for many years, to now turn it into the next step, which is use the framework to our advantage. And whilst we are compliant, we can also make our operations and businesses more efficient and, you know, and profitable as well. So this webinar is about that. And I'll start with the oh, if you let me change the slides. Okay, with the agenda. So we'll talk about the objectives of the webinar. We'll talk about the understanding of ESG, the factors. We'll talk in terms of how do we navigate the regulatory landscape that's changing so much. A few pointers with regards to the profitability driver that ESG is. Some high level and operational level examples or of roadmaps that I have experienced, lived myself. A few case studies that not only relate to the industry that I started with, which is the oil and gas. Some impact of recent events, and I think we all know what the recent events are. So we'll talk about how the recent events are actually impacting ESG, and a few takeaways. So in objectives, I would like to, through this presentation, for the ones that are not aware or the ones that are aware, but, you know, perhaps want more information about it, is demonstrate how we can create financial value through ESG, what overall tactics or strategies we can have to the regulatory changes. We'll talk about the real world success stories. We'll talk about the roadmap that I mentioned before, and really leave it up to the audience today, which to me in the webinars I've done is the richest part. Really, is what really are you curious about? What really concerns you? What comments or what questions you have that I may be able to answer. All right, so let's talk a little bit about ESG in the context of a business risk. You know, so a few years ago we had the BP Macondo example or issue or accident or disaster. You know, 11 people died, 8 billion and 28 billion in damages and cleanups. But really, the only thing that made the headlines was the environmental part of the disaster or the problem that occurred. You know, and it didn't really highlight two things. One was the social part, and the social part under the ESG framework, as we will see, relates to asset integrity, relates to workers' health, relates to many of the aspects, technical and of personnel competency, that would have allowed for this not to happen. But in this case, they allowed it to happen. You know, the reasons, you know, blowout preventers not being maintained properly, decisions made with regards to the integrity of the well that had been drilled, you know, regardless of that, or what specifics they were, they all basically are under the framework of social in ESG. And finally, a bit of my favorite one as well is the governance part, the one that really sets the company on how they operate. And in this case, you know, the people in charge at the time, like in this photograph, the unfortunate CEO at the time, he was just not ready, not prepared to deal with a disaster like this one. They were not ready as a company. The spokesmen were not ready. A surprise to me, to be honest. When I worked for a major company in Australia, and I had to deal with some projects that required me to be in touch with communications such as radio or television. Even though I was only a project manager, I was trained to manage the information and not make the situation worse. Classic examples of this CEO was, and I can never forget, a statement that he made in which he basically said, I want my life back. This is taking too much toll on my life, etc. Which that may be true, but you have to take into context that the disaster ruined a lot of people's livelihoods and all the other damage that was done. That kind of response, that kind of behavior is directly related to governance, as we will see. We'll talk a little bit about there's a training course that I run that covers in more detail these aspects to understand. But here are the 22 or so factors as per one of the standards. I use the GRI standards. There are other standards, but they all pretty much point to the same way. I like this one because it's detailed and it's specific to the energy industry. So you can see on the left side, we're talking about the environment. Yes, we talk about the emissions, but we also talk about other emissions, not just the greenhouse ones. We also look into biodiversity, waste in general, and obviously water and influence. Now the ones that most people, and I'm very much aware of that, is the social part. The ones that people don't really know, that it relates to employment practices, non-discrimination and equality, forced labor and modern slavery, freedom of association, which essentially is the unions, economic impacts that an industry has on places. How do we measure ourselves about that? Local communities, how do we make an impact? A lot of companies like to say, oh, energy companies come to towns, we don't make an impact. Wrong. We make an impact from the moment that we're there, and what our role is minimize our impact and actually contribute and add value to the locations, while we are also adding business that hopefully is relevant to the local community and not just a bigger objective. Land and resource rights, not just in land, but in my own personal experience, also offshore and with fishing rights, like an experience in Oman. The rights of indigenous people, again, something very close to me. I am Peruvian, but I spent 35 years of my life really outside Peru after I was sent to study to the UK by my parents when I was 18 years old. So when I went back to Peru for just 4 years, that was my first time working in Latin America, my first time working in Spanish, which was a bit weird. I had to relearn the language more or less. But the project that I was working on, I was asset manager or field manager for a project in Peru that managed about 1.7 BCF of gas per day and 100,000 barrels of condensate. I was looking after 4,000 people. And more importantly, I was located in the jungle in Peru with 5 different communities around us, and how we were impacting to them, how they were benefiting from us was very close to our operation, which now has been going on for 20 years there, apparently. I left after 4 years and moved on to other things. Finally, conflict and security, something very important with regards to how energy industry can shift, can create issues with security and also conflict. So as you can see, all of this is social, and so many things companies are already doing, you know, maybe not under the banner of ESG, but, you know, it's just now the simple thing is that now there is a framework called ESG, and surprise, surprise, most companies are doing a lot of these things already, you know. Now, governance. Governance is quite interesting because, again, you know, all the issues with regards to asset integrity, process safety, emergency response, incident management, you know, lessons learned, corrective maintenance, preventive maintenance so the accidents don't happen again. That's all governance, you know. Now, the next one is very, very important and very close to the, I think, what I consider the biggest hurdle of companies embracing and taking advantage of what the ESG framework has to be. Climate adaptation, resilience, and transition. This factor under the GRI standard basically talks about how ready is a company to get ready to move on into the phase of minimizing the effect on the environment as an industry, let's say an oil and gas industry, but also how to transition if it's going from one type of fuels or consumption into another one. But why is this the biggest hurdle? Because if you have CEOs or upper management or boards who don't really, cut the story short, want to embrace ESG, this will never happen, you know? And this is the key of governance and the key for everything else to happen. As you will hear me saying maybe on 2 or 3 occasions today, you know, nothing will happen if the leadership doesn't believe, doesn't support, you know. And unfortunately, in the companies that I've worked and in the industries that I've been exposed to, there's still, like I said at the beginning of my presentation, a lot of resistance, and resistance sometimes to even not wanting to understand, you know. And like I said in a separate occasion, you know, I'm embracing ESG is not about hiring an ESG manager and telling the woman or man to, okay, you take care of ESG. And the first thing, and perhaps the only thing that the person will be allowed to do is, you know, what seems to be at the forefront of many ESG considerations by companies is the reporting, right? Which, yes, it's important, but it's not really the main reason why a framework exists. It's about taking action, you know. So just to reiterate again, you know, under governance, how a company behaves, it's really this part, how a company recognizes that all industries have an impact on the climate, and how we can, as an industry, regardless of what it is, continue to be resilient and have a sustainable business, and also transition from fuels or fossil fuels or types of fuels that are not as clean as new ones, and the transition of it, you know. One misconception that I hear a lot in all of, and remember, I'm exposed to at the moment Peru is in the developing country, Iraq, you know, which is a country that's really it's an amazing country. I'm very glad I'm exposed to that, and Australia, just to pick up 3 things. And the level of maturity is very different in terms of what the approach is for ESG. However, what I've heard in all 3 places is the following, you know. Somebody's asked, is your company sustainable? And the answer is, no, it's not. And when I challenged this person who is very, very smart, and I said to him, why in a survey you said that your company is not sustainable? Like, oh, because they don't have any renewable energy projects. And I'm like, I'm sorry, but you're wrong. You know, sustainable is not about whether you have renewable energies or not. Sustainable is about how you conduct your business, how you monitor and minimize emissions and waste, and make your business more efficient by moving into circular economies, by making your social factors right and stable, and governance to be done in the right way. Moving down on governance, closure and rehabilitation is what happens after we finish a project, let's say an oil and gas project, oil wells, gas wells, platforms offshore, flow lines or pipelines that have been installed. How are we going to basically abandon them, rehabilitate the area where they were installed, etc. Anti-competitive behavior. Like, who does wants to be in a situation where there's collusion in the market? Anti-corruption. Who wants to be corrupted? Or who wants their suppliers of metal, of steel, or whatever to be corrupted? Nobody wants that in their business. Payments to governments. Again, this is something that we all know through the lobbying and everything that happens all over the world. This happens, but what's the transparency about it? And lastly, how do energy companies, especially the big ones that have more stroke, affect public policy? So just to dwell a little bit, because like I said, this is part of a bigger training course when we talk in detail. This is the discovery part for a lot of people. ESG is not just about emissions. ESG is about all of this. And all of this is what businesses basically should, must, and are already doing right. And what better way to have a framework that encompasses all of that, and that basically, if you resist to it, it forces you to report and measure how you're doing. Or if you actually take it in the right way, you embrace it, you say like, this is great. Now, I need to measure it for regulatory reasons. I need to report it, but how can I take this to the next level and actually make my business more robust, more sustainable, and resilient to whatever change comes up? So, jumping now into ESG as a business opportunity and financial benefits, the big things are three, the cost savings that come from improving efficiency, reducing waste, optimizable resources. We have a very ongoing changes, especially with artificial intelligence, new ways of working. People need to be retrained, or people need to be modified, or people need to be changed out sometimes, unfortunately. The second one is revenue generation. There's different ways. There's a lot of support in countries like Australia for ESG projects, and so there's credits and bonds and everything that a company can access to. Risk management, another very important point, paying attention and rather than to see it as a whip, seeing as a carrot, look at it positively, strong governance, minimize your operational disruptions, minimize your reputational damage. These days, perception is sometimes, unfortunately, more important than what actually is happening. So you need to make sure that, you do the right thing. Not so much as a company, but as an industry, and help each other. I'll give you an example of what this happened, a personal example. I was in a industry, without going into details, in an industry event with the community and the government, and a colleague company of my industry came to see me and said, well, you are the big ones. You need to convince them that, we are doing the right thing, and we should progress with this project. And my answer to him was, I'm happy for us to do that, but you stop screwing up. You stop doing things that are wrong, because you are our weakest link. You know, the moment that you do something wrong, then all the good work that is done in doing the right thing, you know, gets minimized by just one bad action from you, you know. And that's how all industries and companies can help each other. Right. Navigating through an evolving regulatory landscape. I mean, this happens all over the world. I'll give you an example. Iraq last year, the project I was in, you know, it's a big gas project, big gas plant coming up in Kurdistan. And then this year, we already have not just emissions reporting, but actually targets that we need to comply within, you know. So it's already happening all over the world, you know. And as we know, these, unfortunately, policies change all the time. Why? Because historically, what you see is governments reacting to what is needed based on policies, political parties in power, et cetera. And normally, governments play catch up. And the way they play catch up is they say, okay, we need to do an ESG policy in this case. All right, what are the companies doing? Oh, the company seems to be doing the right thing. Let's grab that and apply that to everybody else. So whilst what I just said happens all the time, that basically creates a lot of changes due to the different maturities of the different government, and as you know already, we're living it right now with regards to the changing policies that could happen any moment as well. You know, if even if the government stays, there could be some changes. If the government changes in Australia, there could be, you know, new changes. That happens all over the world. In some cases, it happens every 5 years. In other cases, sometimes it happens a lot shorter than that, you know. So what do we do? And I hear some examples of policies, but really, what do we do when things are changing all the time? And all we can do is anticipate the regulations by focusing on doing the right thing, by focusing on the ESG factors, you know. There are many frameworks. There's GRI, there's SASB, there's the ISO 26000, there's the Equator Accord in Europe, you know. So it doesn't matter which one you apply, you know, but the idea is to focus on them. And then I anticipate that regardless of what changes in policies will happen, a company will be ready, you know. The second level is turn that compliance into opportunity, as I mentioned in my introduction, you know. Start investing in carbon capture and renewable energy. Look for those green tax incentives. Look for that innovation. You know, if you are a company offshore that you are flaring gas and you're not sure how to use or how to minimize that amount of gas, what happens if a company says, you know what, I can convert some of your gas into energy, I can install servers in the bottom of the ocean of your platform, and the cold weather will, you know, will kill them cool, and I can run computer servers in that way. Now, is that really off the chart? Is that really an idea that is not feasible at all? Well, these days, anything is possible, really. An idea like that one, an innovative idea like that one, you know, can happen, and I'm sure it's happening somewhere in the world, because provided you do the right things, it makes sense, you know. So innovation, it's probably the best thing that can come up out of this embracing of the ESG. And most of the innovation comes from your own employers, from your own employees, sorry. Finally, engage with the policymakers. Yeah, be present as a company. You know, even though you're small, be present in consultations, first as a listener, then we'll see what happens, be part of it. I have a personal problem in countries like the US, like other countries where, people are not obligated or ruled they have to vote, they must vote no matter what. Because what I see is a lot of people complain about the governments, but they didn't vote. Because of my first 18 years of life in Peru, basically everybody must vote, and then the good thing about that is, democracy, whoever the majority wins, fine. Well, if you don't like it, well, wait the next 4 years and do what you can to change things, But if you don't participate, if you're not part of it, then, what's going to happen, right? And yeah, be alert. Align the corporate strategy with government sustainability goals. This is not hard. This is not hard. Why? Because, as I mentioned on my slide about ESG factors, doing ESG is what we should be doing as a business anyway. So it's not, something, weird and wonderful and strange and that, we need to get a specialist ESG person to do. No, we're all ESG in a way. Right. So a practical roadmap. What's the first thing to do? And I've got another detailed one as well. It's like, do a ESG risk of all your factors and an opportunity assessment, set your financial goals, right? Then integrate ESG into operations. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, through efficiency, governance, innovation, and reporting. If we don't monitor it, if we don't measure it, then we don't really understand the numbers and we cannot do anything about it. And then monitor your ESG performance, add ESG to your metrics. Is that so hard to measure yourself that all your suppliers are audited once a year or so on to ensure that their practices come from good practices that don't incur slavery or child slavery or whatever? Is that so hard? Sometimes it only takes a couple of phone calls and a quick visit, and finally, engage with investors and stakeholders. We are a business as well. I mean, the context of this webinar is with regards to businesses, and businesses need investors. Businesses need stakeholders. And for that, you need to be transparent about it. Period. Right. So here's a bit of a roadmap for operations, a bit more detail. So you conduct a risk of all the assessment starting from the left once a year. All, and I should underline and put it in bold, all ESG factors, not just do 2 or 3, do all of them. Do a quick sweep of all the factors. Where are we as a company with regards to this? I don't know. Find out and get back to management, right? Then after that, you set up a baseline, and then you have covered them all, and you say, okay, which are the ones that are going to allow me to be a sustainable company, but also continue business regardless of what's happening. Luckily, without calling it ESG, when I was working in Oman, I was also in my position. I was production manager and also ESG manager. HSC manager. But they also told me, oh, look after IT as well. We were a small company, and luckily, without calling it ESG, I basically put in place all right, so, if people want to work from home, what do they need? All the laptops up to date? Do we have printers they can provide? Do they have good access? In many ways, personal reasons, like it could be one weekend that I want to work from home, or I was lucky in Muscat, in Oman. I had a friend that had a nice boat. So, provided we were staying not too far offshore, I had internet coverage, so I could, monitor production, do my reports, etc. So based on that, I apply some business continuity efforts. Then what happened was COVID came and hit us. And we were ready. We were literally ready. It took 2 seconds to get the IT guy and say, okay, one quick sweep, how's everybody? Five minutes later, everybody's good, everybody's up to date, we can work from home if required. So I didn't call it ESG. It wasn't part of a framework, but now it is. So that's great. Okay, so that's a governance piece, a social piece that we can put in place. Now, once you've set up the priorities, then you set up the goals, because if we don't have a goal, then the next thing is basically not going to happen. So once you set up a goal, I want to be here, a realistic goal, and then you basically do the gap analysis. Okay, where am I with regards to that goal? Then you create an ESG plan with surveillance, and then you move on to measuring or implementing the plan and your KPIs. And the last thing, but not the least important, is regular monitoring, right? Some things can be daily, if not reported, at least captured, right? A monthly report as a minimum, and to both internal and external stakeholders. The messaging has to be clear. And as we all know, some companies, luckily not all of them, are being accused as rightly of greenwashing, right? You don't need to do greenwashing if you basically say, this is where I am, this is where I'm going, and this is how I'm monitoring. That's my reality. It's not that I'm illegal. This is my impact to the environment. This is my impact socially. I need to do better. I'm progressing. And then the following year, you sort of start again by checking, how are you doing against all your factors? And I repeat, all of them. If you do all of them, then it doesn't matter what regulation changes, you're ready as a business. Right, so some quick opportunities in top line growth, attract new energy customers through a sustainable operation. For the ones that may not be aware, when you're doing a gas agreement, for example, a gas sales agreement, just to give you an example, you can demand a better gas price if you are a reliable and sustainable operator, right? That's part of the reason. So it really is good business to do the right thing, Obviously, if you have a good relationship with the community, a good labor relationships with your employees, then, everything is good. Cost reduction, the big one, some things, depending, it's funny, all over the world, I see the same thing. Peru, Iraq, Oman, diesel. It's amazing, the consumption of diesel and how those things can be optimized and minimized, the waste, especially when you transport stuff by helicopter in the middle of the jungle, for example, how do you minimize that? And if you didn't minimize the waste, you actually minimize the logistic cost and the less use of helicopters, less use of fuel, et cetera, et cetera. Minimize regulatory and legal interventions, you reduce the penalties, et cetera, et cetera. But what you should see, and for example, we were in Peru, we used to get a lot of, or regularly, visits from the government. I always welcome them because that's a pair of eyes that help you be better instead of, trying to, hide things or show him this and not that, embrace it. And it's part of the stakeholder engagement. It's part of the, be part of the consultation process in laws. And also it helps you by having a different pair of eyes, productivity uplift, innovation is what really makes a difference in productivity. And finally, our investments and asking for investment people to invest on us, will pay off if we are basically, we work through the investment, we forecast, okay, how is this going to basically going to be long term, what sort of impact are we going to have, what sort of problems we may or may not have. We have the framework, we just have to use it. Right, some studies, very quick ones, and the name of the companies are at the bottom of the photos if you want more details. Here there's one company that implemented AI-driven emission monitoring and automated waste management that helped reduce their cost by 30% and also lowered any emission penalties and hence improving investor confidence. Another example, a company shifted 40% of the operations to renewable power sources. I mean, just 3 days ago, in Iraq, we're talking about, okay, we need to bring a generator to a gas well. Okay, that's going to bring some issues with hazardous equipment next to a well. What do we do? Hey, let's just get a solar panel. And that should be enough power for what we want to do in this specific task. So it's happening all over the world. In Australia, it's been happening for a long time, in the gas industry as well, the use of solar panels. So moving to renewable power sources is not something new, and it's good business. Third example, where a company adopted strong governance. Again, to me, the pillar, the game changer for any company. In this case, after investor pressure, hopefully that's happening less and less, and companies are doing it proactively. And the outcome was you get your credit ratings up, you lower your borrowing costs, you avoid the fines, and it's simple, really. All right. Now, 2 or 3 slides to go. So the impact on ESG right now, impact of current events, the famous Trump tariffs that are basically keeping everybody awake at night, so to speak. In terms of the environmental impact, this, no matter what, will lead to higher costs. And unfortunately, this will also lead to any carbon transition delays in projects. Projects that, were expensive to do. Maybe they get a bit of subsidy. They were already, evaluated. Okay, keep going. Then suddenly, are untenable because things will go up. Costs will go up at least 10%, if not more. Supply chain disruptions. Yes, that's gonna basically definitely come. It's already happening. Unfortunately, the word is uncertainty. We live uncertain times. Uncertainty is something that nobody wants. A company doesn't like it. An investment company doesn't like it. A family doesn't like it. A child doesn't like it. Nobody likes uncertainty, right? And unfortunately, it's the uncertainty that's causing some companies, for example, here in Canada, where I'm talking to you from, are already laying people off, because they don't know which way it's going to go. Our margins were whatever. Our margins potentially, they look like they're going to attack. We thought it was going to be only 10%. Now it's going to be more. Oh, what's happening now? Mr. Trump decided that he's giving everybody 90 days to sort out what's going to happen. All right, so what does 90 days of more uncertainty? Which way is it going to go? Let's wait for the governments to do the negotiation. What is going to wake up Mr. Trump with the next day? How is Australia going to react? How is the US going to react to Australia's reaction? That uncertainty, which it's a different webinar probably to talk about it, unfortunately causes the supply chain disruptions that even create more uncertainty to all of us. In terms of social impact, we're talking about obviously job and wage pressures, effect on prices that affect all of our things that we do under governance. Unfortunately, as I discovered even during COVID, instead of companies or people embracing and sort of getting together to tackle things in a sustainable way, they look for ways to profit out of the situations, and that's probably what's happening already with all these Trump tariffs. Somebody, I'm sure, is making money somewhere, and not in a nice way. Training challenges. What do I refer with that? Is there's a lot of ESG lack of knowledge out there, and unfortunately, it's those training budgets that normally get attacked first. I've seen that before, you know, something that it was crucial. Now it's like, oh, maybe it's a nice to have, and all those expressions that we use. Governance, the big thing, regulatory uncertainty, right? The risk of compliance, you adapt your business to comply with one thing, and then it changes again, you know? And then obviously the pressure on the investors, you know, where are they going to put their money? You know, we need investors to move things for these things to happen, you know? So all of that, basically, it's happening due to this tariff war that we are experiencing at the moment. So what can we do in the meantime to minimize or prevent the impact? You know, start yesterday to diversify the supply chains. You know, look beyond the borders that you traditionally look. You know, look at countries that you may have thought, oh, you know, look at Peru, look at South America. You know, oh, you know, it's a bit too far. It's like, actually, it's not that far. You know, and whatever the language barrier these days, that's not really, it shouldn't be a big issue. Everybody speaks English, I can tell you that, you know. The next thing is circular economy approaches. There's so many opportunities with all our companies to apply this and to minimize cost and be more efficient, you know. Now, advancing ESG-driven operational efficiency, that is basically a consequence of everything above, you know. Leveraging policy incentives, you know, there's so many incentives out there, but if the company doesn't have somebody who's well informed of them, you know, and how to apply them, then you're losing. It's like, you know, I hear stories on one side of like, oh, I wish my kid, you know, this is from my Peruvian country, men and women, you know, I hear from some people saying, oh, I wish I could study abroad. I wish I had money to send my kids, blah, blah, blah. And then I hear from others, oh, you know, I got a scholarship from my daughter. She's gone to Germany to study medicine and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, it's not that the opportunities are not there. You know, there's a lot of scholarships, or in this case, incentives out there that just the company just has to, you know, find out what they are and get on with it. Don't just wait for the announcement to come. And then finally, the reporting and the investor communication. Have that dialogue, especially right now. Don't just say, okay, we'll talk to them after we find out what's going on. That what's going on could be months, you know, if not more. Right, final slide, key takeaways. I hope I have contributed towards determining that ESG is a financial growth driver, not just a compliance burden, as it's seen in some of the places that I've been. Companies with strong ESG strategies will secure better investment, will reduce their cost, and will improve the risk management, especially, you know, in these uncertain times, you know, staying ahead of regulatory changes. You know, if you know that there's a chance that the barrier is going to be this high in the future, then move your company's compliance slightly higher so that, you know, if the law changes, you're already up here, not only doing the right thing, but business-wise, you are ahead of any regulatory changes, you know. And in terms of final actionable next steps, you know, start with the ESG risk assessment, set clear financial focus ESG goals, and promote innovation within your own workforce. You'll be amazed. You'll be amazed of the ideas that your people have. They're just waiting to be heard. That's me. Thank you. Any questions that you may want to put on the webinar chat?
A question from a gentleman asking, how can companies balance short-term profitability goals with long-term ESG objectives and without compromising either of those?
Okay, so good question. The first thing to do is don't look at probably the main thing is don't look at them separately. You know, don't look at short term and long term as two separate things. You know, look at it as in like how this is going to what strategy is going to help me to be sustainably right. If you are sustainably right, or you have the right sustainable strategy, then everything just falls, nicely. So I think by integrating short and long-term goals, then we'll be able to align. There will not be any need to compromise between short and long, because really the key is sustainability, or to basically have a business that's have resilience and sustainable. Yeah, so that's the key. Thank you.
Sure. I think I have one more here. He's asking, what role do partnerships and collaborations play in achieving the ESG goals overall? Particularly in a smaller or resource constrained companies.
Right. So I guess we all have immediate stakeholders, people that we impact, or people that can be impacted positively, hopefully by us. So really is to look around everything, everything. Collaboration with any industry coalition agencies, government agencies, and there's a few of them, by the way. When I was doing some projects in New South Wales a few years ago, to my surprise, it wasn't just one single agency I had to deal with. I had to deal with 3 different ones under the New South Wales government, and those 3 agencies, they had very different understandings of the industry that I was in. So a lot of education with them, a lot of sharing of knowledge, a lot of collaboration really with them, that comes from really the first step, which is simple interaction, simple handshake, simple introduction that leads into communications and opportunities, really. Yeah. Thank you.
Sure. I think just in the interest of time, if anyone online would have to ask any questions, I think this is the best time. You can probably add your questions into chat or Q&A section. George, if you would like to bring up the slide for the upcoming course intakes that are happening later during the year, in regards to the upcoming course with Mastering ESG in the Energy Industry. Whoever is joined us today in the webinar has got an exclusive 10% discount on the pricing for upcoming intakes in Brisbane and Perth. You may get in touch with my colleague Dean in the details here to inquire more about the course. We can also customize these courses as per your team's requirement anytime, anywhere around Australia. So please do get in touch with Dean. As you can see on your slide, his contact details. So I guess, George, I think we're just about to finish the webinar in terms of timings, and I know you're based in Toronto and it's going to be quite late for you as well. So I would like to thank you very much for your time today and covering the subject of ESG, which is definitely insightful and a great content there. And definitely, we shall be in touch with the recording of this webinar in a day or so. So please watch out for that space. So thank you very much, George, for your time today.
Thank you, Dean, and thank you, Imran, and thank you all for the participation into the webinar. And I hope you found it useful. Until next time.
Thank you. Thanks all. Goodbye.
Goodbye.